thinking a little bit more about what we just saw and about the way forward, I'd like to invite some guests on stage for a discussion. May I invite Dr. Krishnan on stage. Dr. Krishnan is an IAS officer of the Karnataka cadre. He has degrees in law and in economics. He earned his PhD in economics from IIM Bangalore. In his distinguished career, he has served in many key positions in Karnataka, in the Government of India, and also internationally. He currently holds the critical post of Secretary in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. In our research about him, we have discovered that he spent part of his youth with the other panelist, Arvind Subramanian, in Delhi. From very reliable sources, we are also told that although he is from Tamil Nadu, he is very well beloved in Karnataka. He is reputed to have a phenomenal memory and is also an excellent storyteller. I request Dr. Krishnan to please come on stage. Our next panelist is Dr. Arvind Subramanian. Dr. Arvind Subramanian is the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. He has written on growth, trade, development, institutions, aid, oil, India, China, Africa, and has published widely in academic and other journals. In the past, Dr. Subramanian had worked in the IMF, taught at Harvard and Johns Hopkins. He is an avid reader of books, fiction and non-fiction. In fact, it is rumored that he advised the then President Obama on what he should read and what movies he should see in preparation for his first trip to India. In his youth, which he spent in Delhi and Ahmedabad, Dr. Subramanian played basketball. But now he is an ardent Arsenal fan. Welcome on stage, Dr. Subramanian. Our last panelist for the day is Dr. Madhav Chavan. Dr. Madhav Chavan is the co-founder of Pratham. Over the last 20 years, Dr. Chavan has led innovations within the organization and contributed to the education space in India and abroad. While Dr. Chavan has a PhD in chemistry and even taught chemistry for a few years in the US and in India before devoting his full attention to education. In his past, he has had a successful Prime TV show, written a thriller, and we have heard that in his youth, he composed songs and was well known for his singing and public performance.
Welcome to the show. So I want to start on a very difficult note for you both. Arvind has black hair. I have grey and you look white. I didn't say that. Anyway, what do you remember of when you were 14 to 18? And how would you compare that with 14 to 18 now from what you just said? Or otherwise? Tough question.
Yeah, maybe you want to start or?
Arvind Subramanian.
Comes later. So I remember actually this phase of my life quite vividly, and I mean I have to say that one of the abiding memories, and again please take it in the right spirit, and it was basically I remember I was 14 and I had joined a new school in Chennai. And one holiday, my eldest brother, who was then studying in Delhi, one of the colleges here, he came back and he used to quiz a lot here. He was quite a good quiz guy who used to, and then he came and said these are the questions that came up in the last quiz or whatever, and I remember my utter panic at how uneducated, poorly read, and unable to answer all these questions that I was. I was totally panicked, and then I made a resolve with him that the next 3 years I'm going to do my damnedest to the vast gap in my reading that existed. I'm going to try and with manic urgency try and fill that, and so that was I think. And I still, of course, regret the massive gap in my education of the, not having been kind of studious enough in the first 10, 15 years of my life. But I do remember that period where this panic set in, and now transposing now to the present, which you asked that question, I'm thinking of our youngest son, who's just graduated from that age of 14 to 18, and as a kind of bad father who tries to make sure that your own childhood anxieties don't get repeated again. I did transpose this, manic, you must read all that I didn't read kind of thing to him. And I must say that they are much more chill about these things, for good or bad, I don't know, but that's I'll stop there.
I must confess, took me by surprise. I was getting ready with data on skills and how bad a job is the government doing, all of that. But my case, 1 to 22, was spent entirely in Delhi. In fact, probably less than 5-6 kilometers radius from here is where I spent all my childhood. And it was great fun. I mean, most of the time we played whatever was the seasonal game.
Right.
If it was football, some World Cup, all of us played football.
Right.
And if it was cricket, we played cricket. And I don't recall studying very much, except closer to the.
Some of us are more studious than others.
No,
Yeah,
so
clearly.
poorly educated. That's right.
So it was class 11. It wasn't 10 plus 2 then. So till about end of class 11, I don't remember to have studied very seriously. And like some of the kids, I wanted to join the army. More to, I think, escape the rigors of the class 11 CBSE final exam. And in my case, I recall to avoid the mock exam, which is typically held 6 months before, 4 months before. So December 1975, it clashed entirely with the NDA exam. So I went and promptly filled up the NDA examination form, and it costed $7 then. And I therefore got exemption from appearing in the school mocks, which was the whole purpose. And NDA wasn't very difficult to crack. I guess it continues to be that. I got in and I insisted I'm going to join the NDA.
Oh.
And the whole world prevented me from joining the NDA. That's a different story. But all I recall is great fun. Childhood was great fun. And I don't see that now. I don't see kids playing at all.
So before I ask the next question, I suddenly remembered, and all these years I had not thought of it. When I finished my 11th exam, I was sent off to learn typing. That's the vocational training. And I actually did learn very much because that was not a good thing to do. So I was, if ASER had surveyed then, I would be in that 5%.
When doing vocational training, yeah.
So now coming along these lines, we never took studying. I mean, some of us didn't take studying seriously. How important is it to be scholastically appropriate? I would say, that you know your division and all that. Is it really that important? From what we just saw, large percentage of children can't do division. Reading is barely. I mean, yeah, right now 75% can read a good text and so on. So, how important is academic scholastic achievement versus other things? How you can actually take it from here and say what you want.
Yeah.
I just thought that because we suddenly seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on can you read, can you solve, or is there something else that we should be looking at?
I have two sort of hard answers to this. I think it's very important. Again, to start with a personal example, I certainly didn't quote unquote study in the manner that you described, but I think I knew my division, mathematics, reading reasonably well, and I was taught very well in school. And I actually went to in Delhi, entirely government aided Tamil medium school where my language, my medium of instruction till class 8 was Tamil. We still have those schools. In fact, one less than 300 meters from here. I went to another one in Lakshmivanagar. My teachers were outstanding. So all the maths and all the the reading that I learned was in class. But having said that, I wanted to, when they were showing us data relating to the ability of kids to do multiplication, division. Arvind, you perhaps know this. At Neemrana this year, Abhijit Banerjee presented the findings of a survey that they had done recently in Delhi, and it's a fairly large sample in Delhi, where they went and checked in kids who are working in shops, kids who are selling sabji, kids who are doing stuff in shops. They checked on something called business mathematics. And questions were things like 800 grams of dhania, 250 gram of adrak, or 400 gram of bhindi, not very round numbers, all kinds of combinations. Daam bataiye, and the kid would say 80 rupaye, 40 paise, and so on, multiple combinations of these. And the same kid given the same thing now as 80% of 23 rupees plus 70% of 48 rupees. He said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But their ability, and they said they tried out multiple combinations. Maybe these kids had mucked up numbers relating to dhania adrak, so they changed it. The results were equally remarkable. So their finding, and it's still preliminary, they have not yet concluded their work. Their preliminary findings were, it all seems to be about pedagogy. So to come back to your question, I think they are important, and we find these in a large number of our employer surveys in terms of what do you guys value. And the interesting finding is, it's less than 25% of skills relating to the domain. I may be hiring a driver, I may be hiring a fitter, I may be hiring a welder, or it could be a retail shop kid. 25% alone is the weightage I give to the specific domain. Balance 75% is about soft skills, etc., where these kinds of skills are clearly turning out to be very important. So I would think they are very important.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And see, I think that I have a much stronger and unambiguous answer to this, because I think this is just absolutely vital. I mean, there's no, and you see, my difficulty here, or my kind of concern here, is that when we go into even asking, is the scholastic thing necessary? Is reading necessary? All it matters is how you get by in the world. I think that we kind of think about ourselves, right? Who we are, what we see, what opportunities open up, what we imagine. Everything is only possible if those basic things of reading and math and everything are available. So I think it's absolutely, I think it's unambiguous that has to be the standard. Over and above all that, we can get into the real world, what the workplace wants. But to realize ourselves as individuals, I think that is just, and we should cut no corners here. And I just want to say one thing, a broader point about, by the way, I think that we should always begin by saying that in all these ASER events, the first part is the most uplifting part. When you see all these things, the downhill has begun, as you can see now, with all of us on stage. It's a really uplifting part. But the one thing I do want to say is that, all these ASER reports, which are so valuable, in kind of telling us where we are, but we shouldn't forget that all these tests that ASER does are measuring something so basic, so rudimentary, that, we don't realize that, having that may not even be, it's necessary, but it may not be enough to do, the basic things in life, to realize ourselves as basic human individuals. to see the world differently, to engage with the world. So in that sense, I think we should be very clear about this, what this is measuring and what these standards are, and that it's really rock bottom kind of things, which kind of gives a sense of where really we are in terms of, and how much more we need to get to in order to provide this basic, absolute minimum to all individuals, all over the world.
Okay, just so that I don't control the direction of the discussion,
Uh,
let me say, make a statement. Now that you've heard these things, of your own, some thoughts that you had, some notes of your own, do you want to say something and maybe then I'll follow rather than lead the conversation?
So one of the things, kind of just following up with what I was saying, there are lots of things that are uplifting about what we saw, but also some things that are really that just hit you. I mean, for example, when 40% or something have said they have no aspirations. I mean, what does it say about life when you have no aspiration at all, at that age where you're just bursting with energy, enthusiasm, etc., right? And that's one. And similarly, that those who have aspirations have no role models, a quite large proportion of them. I think it's pretty staggering, and kind of makes you think, what should be done, what's going on. It's really I found that quite mind blowing actually.
Excuse me. I think it has a lot of immediate and serious implications for what I'm doing. For instance, typically, public policy in empirical vacuum is the general approach of governments, and I would think some bit of what has been started in skilling is somewhat of an exception, where if you look at our policies, all of which precede my arrival in the scene, talk about the need for scale, that is hugely increasing capacity for skilling, improving quality, and addressing this whole aspirational issue. These are the three cornerstones of the entire Skill India mission. But where I think we need to completely change direction is the fact that a lot of our capacity expansion currently is based on a dropout rate at secondary school, which seems to be completely out of sync with what you guys have found. And therefore, creating skilling capacity in training centers which are standalone, away from schools, seems to be the absolutely wrong model. Because skilling in school seems to be crying out as the most important, and still, quick impressions, one needs to go through this in greater detail, seems to be an important implication of this. We are doing this, but at a very minimal level, and the good news is, typically schools that you would least expect to come and have a conversation with you on skilling, like Delhi Public School. The Delhi Public School has reached out on its own to us, talking about the need to do far more serious skilling in, class 8 onwards, and in branches in Delhi. So you're not talking about branches in Bokaro or in Faridabad. So there is a very sort of incipient type realization that we need to integrate this. But I clearly saw, and I'll go through this, the need for doing a lot of integration at the school level seems to be a very, very important finding. And there are many such things I can talk about, but
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Let me just make an observation. Something that occurred to me when I saw the data is that although we've treated 14 to 18 as one age group, actually it seems to be that 14 to 16 is one and 17, 18 is another. Because children still think 10th standard is an objective, and after 10th standard they are wondering now what to do. You can see the numbers change. The number of children out of school or out of college at 18 is far greater than 16 or 17. You can see that starts increasing after 14, 15. So what kind of vocational, let's say we talk about vocational skilling. I have for the last 10 years now, when people ask me introduce vocational skilling in schools, I've been not quite in favor of that. Not until 10th standard. After 10th standard, it's a different thing because you're already getting into an earning age. I feel that everybody must have certain skills. Everybody. People should know. Our country, we never teach children to work with their hands, or at least in the urban areas. And actually, rural areas, we didn't find out. I think in the pilot stages, we tried to find out what they know how to do, but we couldn't verify what they were doing. So, should we give vocational training, or should children have skills of working, doing things with their own hands up to the age of 16? Which one are we talking about? Is it that, you are not doing academically so well, so you should be going into vocational training? I feel there's something fundamentally wrong about that. Now, how would you treat that question? Start vocational training after 8th standard.
For everyone.
Not everyone. Typically saying that some people will go for medicine, engineering and all that, and others will go for vocational training. How would you treat that? Some kids go for the scholastic 10th standard, and others will go for vocational techniques.
See, the dilemma is this, right? And something that KP touched upon is that two downsides to what you're saying. One is that if you say that you're going to get a vocational skill, and if that then kind of determines your path for the next 10-15 years
or life,
that may not necessarily be the right thing, because remember the future workplace requires flexibility, the ability to learn, the ability to adapt continually, and it's not obvious that having some particular skill is the right way to get there. For example, Manish Sabharwal makes this point very well, that if you take the kind of the night watchman from in Bombay, from all over India, but amongst night watchmen in Bombay, there's a kind of a differentiation depending simply on who can speak a modicum of English, who has a modicum of manners, how to engage with, how to talk to people, and stuff like that. So in your model, you would say, I'm going to teach you to become I'm exaggerating, you say the vocational skill of being a night watchman, but the workplace, even if you went down that pure instrumental route, it's not obvious that you're really actually also equipping them for the workplace itself. So I think that we should do everything possible to get that basic minimum, which creates this ability to learn, to adapt, to be flexible. That is, but that's kind of my personal.
I personally agree with the point that you're making, namely that typically our education system doesn't inculcate respect for doing stuff with your own hands and all of that. Having said that, I don't know enough about education, because I hear that there are so many things that need to be fixed. This may be one of them. I'm on a very limited point, which is the second point that you made. There is a scholastic / academic route for a certain set of people, and then there is, for the others, a vocational route. Now that is the current reality, but what I am seeing in what was presented today and in my conversations, as I mentioned, with some of these schools, is that for a lot of kids, it is not an either or. Should you start in class 8? Should you start in class 10? Again, I don't know enough about education, curriculum to decide that. But currently, the CBSE and many boards permit vocational and some skill development courses from class 8, and they actually become serious modules after class 10. My takeaway, and I say preliminary takeaway till I get into the depth of this, is that we need to be perhaps doing a lot more, because many of these kids, and there's one particular kid mentioned here who's doing a BCom and doing ITI to be an electrician.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of, not exactly a separate later pathway, but doing things, because if kids are working and studying, then need for skill development of an appropriate kind, where you're earning 10, 12,000 bucks and not 5, 6,000 bucks, seems to be an important takeaway. That was the point I was making. But since I have the mic, if I can just make 2 more points. Counseling. A lot of our feedback is that counseling seems to be a very important part of everything we do. My best skill centers are those which spend, and we don't really do a great amount of, or a very good quality assessment and counseling. It's very rough and rudimentary. You spend about 45, 50 minutes with that child. There are some standard, tests and methods that have been developed. A quick examination of what are the kind of skills that you're currently coming up with, what are your current endowments. Given this, are you likely to be a great electrician, or are you likely to be a better hospitality worker? You may think you are a great electrician, but whatever our assessment is, it looks like you are likely to become a good hospitality worker. And then, given you may have, say, 2 or 3 potential skills, what is the likely placement in the area that you want to live in? If you want to stay on in Gwalior and not move away to Bhopal or Mumbai, your job prospects are much better in sector A rather than sector B, is the kind of stuff that seems to be making a big difference in the successful skill development exercises. I see similar findings here. Almost every kid saying, "Jankari nahi hai," we need information. And the point about army and police. Now, I have met a lot of skill development guys who've come and said, will you fund, we have a program called the PMKVY, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, where there are a certain set of programs that we do. This center came and asked us, will you fund us if we train kids who want to understand how to crack the defense police recruitment? And at that point in time, our guideline said, no, you can't. You have to prepare them for a job role. This is not a job role. And now this seems to be such a powerful number. Large numbers of kids want to be in defense and police. And defense keeps complaining that we do not have sufficient number of people who are coming in and qualifying. So again, an immediate takeaway for me is counseling with a little bit of help in how do you navigate these tests may be a very important part of what I'm doing.
So let me go back to something that Arvind said, and I suppose everybody agrees with that, is that the future is now such that you have to have multiple abilities, or at least some foundations.
Yeah.
If you don't have those foundations in X, Y, or Z, then what you are going to be in the future? Yes, some test will tell me that I'm a proper, better hospitality worker, but maybe I could be something else. What you are going to be to earn a living and what you are going to be as a human being could be 2 completely different things. And the most famous example I can think of at this moment is Gulzar. He was a motor mechanic until Bimal Roy found him, or somebody found him for Bimal Roy, and became what he is today. So I'm sure if he can't write any poetry, he'll become a motor mechanic again. So what you do for a living, you could be a coolie for all you care, but you could be writing wonderful shairi sitting down by yourself. So this distinction has to be made, where in the 14 to 18 age group, luckily at least 18 till 18 we say this child is not supposed to go earn wages, but people do start earning. So making information available, making pathways and avenues available for children to find this energy and do something different. Because otherwise I think scholastic and schooling is occupying so much time and pressure, which we didn't have, as we started out by saying. How can we create those spaces for young people? They just don't seem to have. All the spaces that are available is school and coaching classes. But now, and recently I've become a big fan of football. I went to a village nearby in Haryana where the whole village plays football. We are making a series on how to play football with those girls, and it's girls who started it, and amazing football players. When you give people opportunity, I hear there is a village somewhere in Andhra or wherever where everybody plays chess. How can that be? Suddenly everybody becomes so brainy as to play chess? Well, maybe then everybody is brainy, but nobody is giving them opportunities. So I think creating these opportunities, isn't that something that we should think of, or we should be only talking about, 11वीं पास करो, 12वीं पास करो, फिर वो करो, फिर vocational training करो, फिर job में जाओ. How are we going to economic advisor advise us? No, because employment is a real issue, right? But so is everything else.
Yeah. I think these are questions way above my pay grade, and I don't, as KP was also saying, I'm not an education expert.
No, forget that.
Yeah.
As a parent now.
Yeah. No, see, as a parent, maybe I think this is what I'm trying to kind of struggle with is the following: that when we think too much in terms of skill and employment, we're exactly, going away from that, realizing what everyone has as, the potential that we all have as human beings. And so too much of this vocational job, pressure is leading us in that direction. And I don't think that the choice is between that and scholastic, grade 12, etc. I think that we are not in school providing that foundational basics, as you called it, to do both. Both to realize yourself as human beings and to kind of have the chance and the opportunity, to pick the vocational skill that you may want to, etc. Just one, slightly unrelated, but one other finding which, I had the, benefit of being briefed by Vilima and Rukmini before I came, and it's something maybe that didn't come out enough in the presentation, that if you look at the ASER data up to 2016, learning outcomes for boys and girls are very similar. There's no statistical difference. But in this age, the wedge has started opening up again quite sharply. What they were saying, across, even on learning and on all things, that wedge is opening up between girls and boys. I think that to me was very striking, and I don't know how we're going to address that. But because remember that at the end of grade 8, which is when all the ASER thing tells us is that about 70-75 can do grade 2 test. It's not even that they're grade 8 level. And then if after that the wedge opens up even further, I don't know what, so I'm just raising questions. I don't have at all any good answers.
Actually, at that point, as Vilima said, she gets a lot of criticism from the stage. I think it's about time we try to figure this out on the urban side, because I was looking at census and All India Survey of Higher Education figures as well, because I wanted to counter check what we were saying and what they were saying. And it seems that wedge is not so much in the urban areas. There is a big wedge in rural areas. If you take the percentage of graduates in urban populations, it is touching something like 25%. And it seems like 24 and 23% is, whatever that number is in boys and girls, and men and women, in the age group of 20 something to 29 or whatever. So that wedge doesn't seem to be urban, and if you're getting more and more urban, then this is going to happen. Either rural, there is a problem. But anyway, KP, I just want to focus on this skilling thing. Is there a need, a very serious need, to now start looking at skills? And I'm not saying vocational skills. I'm saying, is our population skilled? Because I suddenly I start seeing, I don't watch television these days, but these music programs are so fascinating. When we were growing up, nobody taught us music, and suddenly these boys and girls, little ones even, are excelling in music. I mean, I'm not even saying it with any patronizing attitude. They're just too good. How is this happening? There are so many things happening, and all this is skills. And these skills are going to lead to eventually people even inventing jobs and becoming entrepreneurs. Because the jobs of tomorrow are not necessarily going to be like jobs of yesterday. We know that. The other day, we were on the stage with some of the people, Uday Kotak was on it, and I said, maybe the jobs of future will have more jobs in entertainment, health, and sports. And he agreed. He said, yes, that's true. So so maybe we should take a complete relook at skills and vocations, or separate them, combine them differently.
Regardless of what happens to entertainment,
Yeah.
India will still need X crore number of carpenters. It will need fitters. It will need welders. So I think there is a very basic set of issues that Ministry of Skill Development and the ecosystem will need to deal with. And I completely agree with your earlier observation, the Gulzar kind of point. And maybe the chief economic advisor, I thought, would have said that it is perhaps something like a luxury good, in the sense that yes, I'd like every kid to be able to do what he or she wants in terms of learning vocational academic stuff, as well as excel in whatever else is his or her chosen passion. But I think it's, for a lot of them, it's a question of affordability. If you have to start working at whatever age you have to start working, then I sort of read my mandate in a very narrow fashion, namely, the kid may be a brilliant singer. That's not something I'm going to be doing with that kid. My ecosystem is going to be trying to make sure that instead of a 7,000 rupee job, that kid gets a 15,000 rupee job, because that kid will need a job. So I'm deliberately staying away from the larger issues you're raising. Those are necessary, but as a governmental department focusing on skill development, I think I should define my goals reasonably narrowly. Namely, India is likely to grow and the society is likely to grow in a certain direction, and that requires a whole bunch of capabilities, that requires a whole bunch of skilled manpower. And I think I should, and the ecosystem that I'm part of, should try and produce that.
KP, just this is a. See, we know from all the evidence, and you know this much better than I do, that if you look at the workforce, people entering the workforce, things, about roughly 75% of your skills are acquired on the job, right? Now, you take that fact, point number one. Fact number two, that government has no great comparative advantage in either identifying what the skill should be, nor in even being able to provide it very effectively. Yeah. So if you think in those terms, even in purely functional, you have to get them. I mean, isn't it more important to then get these 14, 18-year-olds, whatever, apart from whatever they do by way of functional literacy, etc., actually get them into jobs and get them, get the skill acquisition on the job, and forget about government is going to provide skills of carpentry, this, that, and the other. I'm just raising a question. I don't know what the answer is, but it's a striking fact that 75% of skills in India are acquired on the job.
That is absolutely true. So I suppose it's true in most places. But here the skills that we are talking about, the carpenters and the plumbers and so on, today everybody is learning there and nobody is coming from vocational training institutes. I mean, we give modular courses for 3 months or so and put them on the job with all these conditions of 75% should be placed in the jobs and all that. But the problem is that aspirations wise, if you see, nobody said I want to be a carpenter.
Exactly.
Because that is not an aspirational job, although they will end up being those. We also run these vocational training programs. We train something like this year, 25,000 kids will be trained, and we say that we do place about 90% of them in these jobs. We find that to get the 25,000 youngsters in the training programs, we have to reach out to something like 60, 70 times as many. People just don't want to come because aspirationally they've all been told, pass your 10th standard, get a white collar job.
And go to the army.
Go to the army.
Yeah.
So and yet we know that they will end up manning various other posts of the economy that they need to do. Unless you have something to say, I was going to ask whether the audience want to jump in and start asking some questions, or whether they have any comments, or do you like the way the conversation is going now?
Let's get.
You're tired of me.
I'm tired of myself actually.
Questions two ways. Do you want to give the mic, or do you want to give some piece of paper that you can pass back here? Mic?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yes. And please.
Hi.
Do you want me to introduce you, or you want to introduce
I can
yourself?
introduce myself.
Yes, please.
I'm Kirit Parikh. I used to be a member of the Planning Commission when ASER presented its first report, and I immediately made a small contribution because I thought it was an extremely important thing, and I'm so delighted to see what you've been doing over the years.
And you have contributed to ASER in the very first year. Thank you.
Yeah. I listening to this, I realize how fortunate I have been to go to a school in Ahmedabad, which was run by a set of Gandhians, you could say. And the school had, along with every class from class standard 5 to 10, 2 days, 1 hour every day for something called Udyog that you select yourself. And the choice involved painting, music, carpentry, smithing, agriculture, spinning, weaving, and a whole lot of these. So that I think what one learned from that is that you acquire all these skills. You didn't feel that this is something that only those who want to be carpenters need to do it, but that everyone gets this. And I think over the years, one has to learn to deal with all these things in any case. So I think what was being said, that yes, it should not be a separate thing, that those who want to be scientists go here, those who want to be engineers go ahead there, and those who want to be carpenters go here. I think that would be really a very bad way of doing things. We should introduce these kind of things in schools right across the country.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Supreet. I've been with ASER and Pratham for 4 years, and just wanted to ask a question.
But not right now. Say that as well.
Not right now, yes. I started when this discussion was started 2 years back, so we are very interested to see the findings. I wanted to ask a question to the panel, which is, today we are looking at when Dr. KP mentioned that the government is skilling for certain roles like carpenters, electricians. So one point is that even their sector is evolving in terms of the jobs that they have at larger manufacturing firms. The second point is, when we look at the link between education and skilling, it's a fairly linear link where teachers, principals in grade 12, for grade 12 children, the discussion is more about how to crack an exam and go to a school versus talking about science as a point of curiosity for you to take up a new challenge in science and solve. What I'm trying to ask you is, as the government, what is the thinking towards nudging students versus putting them on a linear path and expecting them to progress well in the career?
Okay, some more at the back. I want to go a little at the back and then come in the front. Always, otherwise the front of the class gets the chance. Yes? There are 3, 1, 2, 3 at the back that I can see. Yes, and 4. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jayashree. I've come with my partner Malti. Here we are actually starting a magazine in Hindi for children of this group. So the reason why I attended this is to see what is that the ASER reports say about their reading. Reading is okay, basic reading, textbook reading, but do they have these leisure reading habits? Because most of the time what I feel is that whatever all the discussion which we are having till now is that either they are becoming tools in our productivity thing or our thing, but what is versus human beings. But it's not versus, it's together. And all these things, nobody, like no institution can teach them for lifelong. They have to develop that. Maybe to certain extent the government helps in skilling and all those things. So right now, the reason why I have taken is that how much emphasis is given by anybody, any institution or any civil society thing, working for developing that leisure reading habits or writing, leisure reading and writing habits, and what are the initiatives they are taking to fill, because right now in that age group, there are no magazines or no resource material for such age group.
No.
So what is that the institutions as civil society organizations and as government doing that?
Okay. At the back there, the gentleman standing. And next is here, yeah. And then we'll come to the front.
Yeah. So I'm Abhishek. I work at Saja, a not-for-profit working for parental engagement. My question to the panel is the kind of institutional reforms we need for whatever it's skill, vocational skill, 21st century skills, and like foundational skills. What kind of institutional reforms do we need? Because I feel really uncomfortable when I like see education and vocational education in different departments. So that's the question.
Sir, okay. So you are saying should they be integrated?
Let's reflect on it.
Let's come here. Yes, please.
ये सर असर की रिपोर्ट को मैं हर साल कवर करता रहा हूँ
जी।
और अब क्योंकि आपने बियॉन्ड बेसिक की बात शुरू की है तो बेसिक तो हमारा पूरा ही नहीं है तो बियॉन्ड की बात तो बाद में आती है और मेरा ये कहना है सर कि जो वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग की बात आप कर रहे हैं तो वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग तो दी जाए लेकिन लोग लेना नहीं चाहते जैसा कि आपने कहा। अब क्यों नहीं लेना चाहते ये महत्वपूर्ण सवाल है क्योंकि हर व्यक्ति की एक्सपेक्टेशन होती है कि हमें अच्छा से अच्छा जॉब मिले, लेकिन जब हम स्कूल से ही जैसा कि गांधी जी चाहते थे कि स्कूल के समय से ही लोगों को उस तरफ मोड़ा जाए जिस तरफ वो जाना चाहते हैं, तो उस दिशा में रिपोर्ट क्या कहती है ये जानना चाहता हूँ। और ये भी जानना चाहता हूँ साथ साथ कि रोल ऑफ पंचायत क्या होगा, क्योंकि मैं गांव पंचायत पे एक वेबसाइट चलाता हूँ तो आप स्किल डेवलपमेंट की बात करते हैं, स्किल काउंसिल भी बनाते हैं, लेकिन स्किल काउंसिल गांव पंचायत से कितना संपर्क करती है?
Some of the questions are not really directed at the panel. They were directed at Vilima and Rukmini. So you be prepared as well. Oh, no, you can't. Okay. Yes.
Good morning, I'm Arundhati. I work at an organization called Anubandh. We are essentially talking about interconnectedness in various aspects of life, not just education but also development. So when we talk about education, we see that there's quite a disconnect between what is taught and what is expected to be, like the panel obviously mentioned, the future jobs are going to change, and so in keeping all of this in mind, do we really think that the current education is readying our kids for the future? And if there is a change that needs to happen, is it in the content of what we teach, or how we teach our kids? So maybe we should look at Gandhi's Nai Talim, or even take inspiration from Finland's recent education reform. And the next question is, if such changes have to happen, do these happen on the policy level from the center, or are schools as mini ecosystems?
I think we could start answering right now.
I have one question.
Who is saying that?
Yeah.
Just wait just a second. I will go in the second round. अब खत्म नहीं कर रहे, बंद नहीं कर रहे. So Kirit kicked off by talking about the integration, and somebody else brought up their integration, and now again connectedness, interconnectedness. That's a good thing to work on. Again, you're going to say I'm not an educationist. You're not allowed to say that. You give your opinion anyway.
So I think there were lots of questions.
He has to give opinion.
On skilling, there were a lot of questions.
No, specific questions.
Yeah, please go.
Please.
Earlier you said, and for instance, Supreet spoke about, just a matter of clarification in terms of facts. Government is actually not skilling. The way the system works at present is take the long duration skilling, which is the ITI system. 86-87% of Indian ITIs are private. They are not government ITIs. It's a very small 12-13% of ITIs are government. The short duration skill ecosystem, which is the training providers and training centers, almost entirely, nearly 100% is private. So, government is not skilling, but government is funding almost this entire activity. The fees in the ITI are very small amounts, and in many states, a lot of the fees are actually paid by state governments for most students. So the way this is evolving, or the way it's evolved, appears to be a textbook case of what in public economics is called a merit good. Right from skilling is being treated like primary basic education as a merit good, funding by the public budget, but actual production of the service, the delivery of the service is being done by the private sector. Collectively, are they doing a great job? Both the hard evidence and the anecdotal evidence seems to be no, they are not doing a great job. The quality employability of a bulk of our graduates of the skilling and the vocational education system, both quality and employability are poor. Now, the question that, for instance, Abhishek had on institutional reforms. The institutional reform that I would sort of look at immediately when you have a case of public funding and private production, inherently quality will suffer given the low capacity of the state to enforce contracts and get outcomes as envisaged. So it appears to be a very explosive combination where you allow not-for-profit private sector like in engineering and medical, you have extremely strong regulation and enforcement of quality formally. But in the area where you've actually allowed for-profit private sector as a matter of policy, you have no regulation at all. So today, if an ITI has to be shut down, there is legally very little that a government can do to shut down a poor ITI, because there is no legal framework on which you can actually shut down a poor quality training provider. So the institutional reforms that are currently being looked at, both at the center and the states, and remember this is a concurrent list subject, so there's a lot of action which lies at the level of the state government, is to bring in quality enforcement. Is it best done through a statutory regulator? Is it best done through some other form? Is the question which one is looking at. So the institutional reform that one is looking at in vocational education and skill development is how does one bring in quality? How does one bring in employability? So one effort at employability which is being tried out, and as of today not very successfully, is to bring in employer connect in the form of the entire course content, delivery, assessment, certification is being done by associations of employers. The formal jargon for this is sector skill councils. So sector skill council led by industry is actually doing all of this. Are the outcomes dramatically different? No, not yet. In some sectors, the outcomes seem to have improved hugely, but the average sector, the outcomes do not seem to have increased hugely. So how does one bring about employer connect and ensure quality and sort of employability is the serious piece of institutional reform one is looking at. On integration, it doesn't require serious institutional reform because the fact that there is a separate skill development department and separate educational department need not mean they will work in silos, and nor is the reverse true. When skill was part of education, the integration wasn't particularly high. So is it possible to do greater integration of these in the manner that Professor Kirit Parikh mentioned without serious rejigging of organizational structures? My sense is it's possible, and that's being attempted. Very many state governments have done it very well. At the Government of India level, there are some policy type impediments. There are no serious organizational impediments. I think I'll stop here.
Let me come back to the ASER report, and maybe it also provides an opportunity for Rukmini and Willima to clarify some things. You see, I think that this report is breaking ground in several ways, as you mentioned, and because among many things, you've shifted to a new cohort, the 14 to 18. Now, you have all these findings, and then you say, so what should we do? And I think that's kind of the question that all of us are now going to grapple with in light of these findings. And I guess there are, two ways of going. I mean, these are not mutually exclusive ways. The one way is to say, as the gentleman said, "Arey basic hi nahi hua, hum beyond basic ki baat kar rahe hain." So the one way to go is to say, look, what this means is we have to go back and focus on the basics. Lots of problems there. Let's try and fix that. And then you have the whole agenda that ASER has created. The other way is to say, look, maybe we can fix it, maybe we can't fix it. In any case, you have this huge cohort here. What do you do with them? And frankly, I think these are such basic and deep questions of, should you have vocational, should you not? I think we require, a much deeper rethink of how we should go. I don't think we can just make these things up on the fly and say, they did it like this, they did it like this. I think it just opens up a whole new set of questions, which frankly, I think I certainly don't have any answers to. But in principle, I guess the basic point I want to make is that the fact that you're focusing on the 14 to 18 cohort, new issues, new problems, but there is a big connection back to the schooling itself, the basic schooling itself, and let's not lose sight of that as we think about this 14 to 18 cohort group.
Okay, more questions. So आप पूछ रहे थे. सामने यहाँ पे दो हैं.
Very good afternoon. I have one question. Simply, it is likely to be included the life skills as well as aptitude testing and career. More awareness should be given in the village area. So there must be some forms or something where whatever they have taken up, so they need to be more aware about the future, the career, and how they should go about it. And emotional strength is also one of the part that should need to be looked up.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
I'm Santya from Population Council. I have a comment and a question for the panelists. The discussion, in the morning there was a participatory exercise about what we are looking for adolescents, for the 14 to 18, and we want to make them succeed in an adult life. And the discussion, while very important, in terms of seeing them as an economic worker, we are looking at education and vocational skills. We should not lose the sight of an adulthood life is not just that of an economic worker, which is very important, but that's not enough. And when you looked at beyond basic, this is a question to Willima, you looked at abilities, which is again a functional ability as an economic worker. But very recently the Population Council did a survey of 10 to 19-year-olds in two large states, Bihar and UP. And we find a huge unmet need for vocational training. And what the girls reported, why they could not, access that skill, a major reason is that they face objection from the family. They did not have the ability to negotiate. When we look at beyond basics, we should be looking at the real agency for negotiating life choices. And my question to Dr. Krishna is that when we talk about skill building, how much emphasis are we placing on building life skills to negotiate, to communicate, and to exercise real choice, whether it is a worker or even a wife or a parent, but should we be emphasizing on that in our schools, in our vocational programs, in all platforms we work with 14 to 18-year-olds?
Thank you, very good question.
My name is Abhishek, and I work with Generation India Foundation. I wanted to make a comment on the report that came out, and it looks like that most of the candidates seem to have basic arithmetics and numeracy skills, which is what we have also found in some number of candidates that we have trained, that it has never come in our way. If I were to give you a statistics, top 5 roles, if you look at in terms of what generates the number of jobs, a retail salesperson hardly requires anything beyond basic arithmetics or numeracy skills, literacy skills. Similarly, whether you look at the logistics or you look at the hospitality, what seems to be coming out from Dr. Krishnan, from your point as well, was that employers seem to be saying that 75% of that is soft skills. If I were to decode that soft skills, in our experience, it is only 2 mindsets. One of them is personal responsibility, and the second one is persistence. And in both these mindsets, we believe that in a bootcamp mode, this could be taught. It is a concept which is alien to a lot of candidates, but it can be taught very well and can be imparted effectively. If we solve for that, you will find that many kids, youth in this age group, would be ready to take up jobs, and then we could train them more. Or thank you so much. Your comments requested.
Well, good comments, but I don't think this is a question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Kapoor, and running a school for underprivileged children in Gurgaon. I want to know, we are talking about beyond basics. The basics itself, as somebody commented here, are not been dealt with at all. By basics, I mean I don't mean only reading and writing. What do you see so many juveniles now committing crimes? Has anything been done to teach them what is right, what is wrong? Why are they committing so many crimes? So many of them are on drugs, even in good private schools. They are on drugs, they are driving underage, they are drinking. What is being done about these problems? Is it only reading and writing that we have to be concerned about, the future generation? That's my question. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes. Please come there. थोड़ा peripheries में जाके आते.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is King Shuk. I'm a researcher at the University of Delhi and also work with one of the organizations here. I have a couple of questions actually. One is related to what ma'am asked. See, when we were talking about the basic minimum responsibilities of the education system, while I agree with both the speakers that we need reading and writing and vocational skills, but don't you think that also the basic minimum responsibility of education system should be to inculcate making the students understand, acknowledge and respect the different levels of differences which exist between persons, to sort of ask and try to answer the questions as to how and why these differences come about and can be made free. I think this is necessary because otherwise people will be loyal, unquestioning beings who work in an organization. And the second question is sort of related to that, sir, and especially to Dr. Subramanian. Sir, don't you think that if we assume that what I'm saying is true, don't you think that it is necessary for the governments to take control of the education system altogether? Otherwise, again, private entities do not have much incentive to produce thinking individuals out of their students.
Thank you. Yeah, just 1 second. आप इनको आप माइक दे दीजिए. नहीं, आपको नेक्स्ट के लिए तैयारी करके रखिए आप. ओह सर, आप बैठिए 1 मिनट.
My name is Tanya. I'm from the Accountability Initiative at the Center for Policy Research. There was one point, sir, that you raised in the conversation that I found very pertinent. One of the big takeaways from this survey is that there is lack of access to information. Even kids who have had aspirations, wanted to become, the police, join the defense, join the police, or even normal government jobs, do not have enough information to understand what does it take to do this. And like you said, if there are institutions that are coming to you and asking you for assistance in facilitating students to get this access of information, do you think this is also something that should be a part of the government's approach to vocational skill building or to facilitating students? That's one. And the other is even, I mean, if we step back and look at the education system, this is not something that we are taught inside schools. It's, I think even in very big private schools, students only start seriously thinking about what does it take to enter a certain profession once they've finished class 10, and now they're thinking about medical, or they're thinking about joining engineering services. If from a very young age, schools themselves have a certain access to information which is more based on life skills, like how to open a bank account, how to conduct transactions, how to file an RTI, or how to do taxes. Things we don't learn in school. It's all, it's something we end up doing much later. I feel like this is something both the government and the education system can inculcate from a very young age, so that we are much better prepared by the time students are exiting the school system for, prepared for adulthood. So.
Thank you. Last question in this part, and then we'll go out to the more. Yes, please.
Sir, I'm Shivappa from Karnataka, University of Mysore. Sir, my question would be, we were talking and we are talking regarding nationalization of education. Every state, since it is a Professor Krishnan said, Dr. Krishnan said, since it's a concurrent list, and also education is the responsibility of states as well as the center. We were thinking, and also many intellectuals, experts from the education field say that nationalization of education, especially primary education, is the need of the hour.
Nationalization. That is
certain
centralization.
Nationalization, sir. Nationalization of education. It's some of the basics. For example, every state has private people, private institutions are delivering the services.
So it should be all public education.
Public education.
No private.
No private.
Okay, good.
Yeah, then we will maintain certain standards in meeting the needs of the students, and the basics are going to be met in each and every state. Now it's like it has become like fishing in the troubled waters. So all the politicians, they have started schools, making the profits out of these things. This is the one of the major area to make profits. And all the MLAs, as I know, MLAs and MPs have started the schools in each and every district, and it has become an industry kind of a thing. And they are not talking about any values and any even these things, ASER reports or maybe any other thing. It doesn't go to them. I think I am, Arvind Subramaniam sir. I would like you to respond to these things. How we can go about very firmly about
I don't know a lot of politicians who are opening schools and making money, so I'm not an expert on that.
You know, I'm not opening schools. That's all. But let me not.
And also the
very few questions are coming to you.
Sir, the second point is one of the madam was telling, I don't know the name, but beyond these basics, we are not preparing our students from a human value point of view, or humane to the core. And we are the content and other things everything is they have to do mathematics, arithmetics, that this and all. The human relationships are more important in a society to live with, and how the human relationships are being nurtured in the family context or in the school
Thank you.
context.
Got it.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Before you answer, I think most of the questions are coming flying at you rather than.
No, most of them are comments. Flying at me.
Yeah, exactly. No, but so that I don't get you completely off the hook, I want to go into a slightly larger question that I have in mind. What is the correlation between education and jobs, or education and economy? We used to think, the demographic dividend. Sometimes people don't even whisper those words, right? And then looks like, this is the question that I had in my head. I asked many people, and I don't get a very convincing answer. I don't get a real answer. It is said that if you have an educated, skilled society, you will have economic growth. But if you don't have a sufficiently educated and skilled society, can you still have economic growth, 6.1% or whatever? Because 6.1% is not trivial growth. So how far will it go? Or will you be blocked? It will go down. What will happen? Just thought,
You want me to?
Please, and then you can also.
KP, you want to go first?
Slippery.
Okay, see, let me say two or three things, because I think there were two pointed questions of whether it should all be public education and not private education. That was a big question. And I think, you see, I think in this, we just cannot afford to be dogmatic about, one is better than the other, for one very simple reason, that we know from all the work that ASER has done that, there are problems, deep problems in the public education system. There are also problems in the private education system. So no one has a monopoly on incompetence. They both, have problems. So I think we shouldn't be dogmatic about it. I think we should just see what works, where it works. Maybe in some places, public works, in some places others work, and we should be completely agnostic about it. So I don't think there's a public versus private. So that's point number one. Point number two, it's a point that we discussed last time when we were here. I think if you step back about India and ask, and now I'm coming to kind of big picture, a question that I'm going to come to that. If you ask what, in terms of our social and economic policy development, what was the original sin that India committed? And the answer unambiguously has to be the neglect of health and education, human capital. I would say that's the absolute original sin that our founding fathers committed in terms of economic policy. Fact one. Now, why that is the case, I think there's complicated reasons. There's a Nehru, why did Nehru do this, etc., etc. But I think that all of us have to confront maybe what I'm going to say is a very provocative thought. This is not something I have a lot of research on. That if you look around the world, Western Europe, China, Asia, I think a commitment to everyone having education and health requires a fundamental ethic of equality in society. I think we have a kind of deeper original sin etched into our DNA, which is we don't have this ethic of equality because we are a fundamentally hierarchical society. That hierarchy has come in the way of embracing education for everyone, because we look around the world, the Christian church, the Communist Party, whatever, they all believed in a fundamental ethic of equality, and therefore we got education the way we have it. And I think we have to, as I keep saying, you have to look, the enemy is us, it's no one else. And I think unless we, address those elements of hierarchy in our society, we will never actually make fundamental progress on this. Therefore, a related point in this is that the puzzle for me about India for the last 40, 50 years is the following. Is when everyone says, why doesn't government provide, why doesn't private sector provide, etc., etc., the question has to be, why hasn't our political system delivered providing better education as a political opportunity? I mean, how many politicians over the last 50 years, and remember, not just central, all over the states, why haven't politicians said, vote for me, I will educate all your children and provide health to all your children? I mean, as I keep saying, in the last election in UP, I mean, the incumbent said, vote for me, I build the Delhi-Agra highway. I'm exaggerating, but the discourse happens around that. So I think unless we address that fundamental problem in our democratic politics, why education doesn't resonate as a political opportunity, we will not get anywhere. Answer to your question, very simple. I think that around the world, long-run economic development, long-run, unambiguously associated with high levels of education, high and rising. I think we have been an exception to that, but I think it is not, at least from the evidence, sustainable over very long periods of time.
Okay. We're actually running out of time, so unless you want a second round after this, you made your closing statement.
Yeah, maybe closing.
Why don't we please respond and it's up. No, don't rush.
No,
don't rush.
my
Just
comment
say,
was
yes, sir.
I have a slightly different understanding, I think, of Professor Shivapa's question, probably because I'm closer to Mysore than you are, going by what the compeer said. I think when he spoke about nationalization, my reading is national standards that are common and national funding is what I read as. I think the nationalization as public sectorization, I don't think was entirely in his mind. This is my reading. If that is the case, I think we have something of it. There is a minimum prescribed sort of achievable or desirable goal that all of India must aspire for, regardless of differential conditions in states, and a large amount of the resources coming from the union is perhaps already a reality. So this is not nationalization in terms of takeover by one entity, but an acceptable minimum national standard is how I read it. The other questions or comments, Madam Sandhya, Abhishek, I think Tanya, all about the importance of foundational or basic life education or soft skills or whatever words one uses as being important, A, for just being a good human being, B, good citizenship,
responsibility.
Also, yeah, and just becoming a good adult, being able to handle one's own life, and also therefore being important for careers and vocational education is not something anyone can disagree with. And I completely agree with the spirit of all the comments. And I do know, for instance, the experiment that Abhishek spoke about, lots of, almost all our vocational education programs now have this component. How successfully they are executed is a question mark, because it requires such good quality skills in the provider that it's, when you're talking about crores, it's not very easy to replicate. We have a huge problem of inadequate training capacity, inadequate capacity of teachers, the education side. We have the same thing on the skilling side. Certainly on the soft skills, foundational skills, this is a major constraint. But having said that, I'm also familiar with the kind of experiments that Abhishek spoke about. Some very good examples in Bangalore by not-for-profit foundations, which have managed to get this compressed, encapsulated in a small module, X number of hours, and delivered very effectively. So I think there are ways in which we can do this. So in terms of broad points, I think it's these. I have one closing comment, if you permit. Yes. I think the person who introduced us also forgot one more thing, that Rukmini Madam was also part of the same original group in college, and like Bhavna and Manju said, I for one was also Rukmini Madam से मैं भी बहुत डरता था, मैं जानता ही नहीं था. But हाल ही में I have also sort of got to know, and I completely agree with what they said very nicely. She is the best.
Actually, at this point, I should just thank everybody and exactly. So you're saying I shouldn't say anything?
Do you have time for one more question from the backbench here? Just one last question here.
There is time for question, but no time for answers.
That broadly sums up the sector, no?
Yeah, I know.
More questions than answers.
Okay, right here, sir. On your right. Yeah, hi. Hi, my name is Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. I just have one single line question for both the panelists on the stage there. What do you think that the compulsory and the mandatory promotion until class 8 under the RTE that really works? I say that because the minute you get to the 9th standard, we've seen this big Pandora's box open up, reality sinks in, and people are finding, especially public institutions, finding it extremely dangerous and difficult to deal with students at that stage who can't, as the report also points out, can't do basic division, can't read or write at that level. We're also studying at a time when more and more states who seem to be serious about education are pitching in and are writing letters to the center as well, asking them to get away and to do away with this. So what is your comment on that? Do you think it works or do you think it does not work?
You want to say something?
Because I haven't studied it enough. I just don't
No,
know.
let me just say that there will be many questions, and I have a feeling that maybe ASER Center has been so successful in having these annual events. Maybe we should have it more frequently, and then because otherwise you're jamming everything into one session of 1 hour and all that. These are questions for a round table with more people coming in. I just want to leave. I want to thank you for coming to this event. Just want to comment about this beyond basics and what people have been saying, that more things should be done in the school. It can't be only teaching reading, writing, arithmetic. That is true, but I think we are putting too much emphasis on the school as well, to think that the school is going to do everything. What about the family? What about the community? What about the politicians? If you are going to have politicians who are going to encourage crime, then children are going to learn something completely different. What are role models? I think we have to think beyond school as well. And it's not just the school that is going to be responsible. That is definitely the case. And about beyond basics, just want to leave you with one thought. 20 years ago, people were saying, India is a poor country. Actually, why 20? 30 years ago, India is a poor country. We can't afford computers. Computers aa gaye. India is a poor country. We can't afford cell phones. Sabke haath mein cell phone aa gaye. Somehow this leapfrogging into the future, when you don't have the basics, actually is creating a new plinth level where suddenly you have beyond basics in your hand. And that's why maybe teaching mathematics about division, the child may not be able to do division. But I have a feeling that if we start teaching them how to do division with calculators, we'll have a revolution. Mathematicians won't like it, but that's the beyond basics that I am striving for. So thank you again for all of you for coming and this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being a great audience and participating the way that you did. I just have one small request to make before I thank the panelists. There are 3 people who have not returned the clickers. Please return them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panelists. As usual, it was an engaging discussion and we look forward to having you all back every year. For everybody in the audience, please join us for lunch outside and remember to take your copy of the report before you leave. Thank you very much.